Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, if you tuned in last week, you know that this is the second part of a two-part series on, would you believe, not only preventing but reversing Alzheimer's. And those of you who have listened to me for some time might think, I talk about relationships, and here we are looking at a disease, something medical, but there is so much here for all of us. We all want a positive relationship to ourselves. We want self-esteem. We want a sense of identity, a sense of memory. And we are robbed of all of that, and we are robbed of our relationships. So many of my clients talk to me about their aging parents and who have dementia or Alzheimer's and who don't recognize them or barely recognize them but don't know their names, and what it takes for people to go through this. They talk about Alzheimer's being a disease where the family suffers. The patient themselves doesn't suffer all that as much as the family members do, because the person is out of it in many ways. And of course, there are stages of Alzheimer's, as I'm learning from Dr. Bredesen, there are different types of Alzheimer's. So I am thrilled again, Dr. Dale Bredesen, for you to come on Just Relationships. And we are live streamed, and this show can be heard throughout the world because all you need is your trusty little iPad. It's quite amazing. So Dr. Dale Bredesen, The End of Alzheimer's, the first program to prevent and reverse cognitive decline. Welcome back, Dr. Bredesen.
Thanks very much, Dr. Duffy.
So we're looking at ways to prevent. Let's start with that. And, of course, ways to reverse, which I imagine are quite similar to the ways to prevent. And let's look at the standard American diet, which by definition, SAD, is very, very sad. And the acidic foods that people eat, the meats and the grains, and of course all processed foods, dairy. So tell us what we can do to prevent Alzheimer's nutritionally.
Tremendous. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount that you can do. And I would start by saying that it's important to recognize that before you have full-blown Alzheimer's diagnosed, you have about 20 years of underlying pathophysiology. So talk about something that can affect your relationships. If you're not quite yourself, if you're not remembering as quite as well as you should, if you're not performing quite as well as you should, if you're not organizing quite as well as you should, of course it affects your interactions with other people. Now, the overall program that we developed based on the test tube research over the last 30 years does include diet, exercise, sleep, stress, then a brain training, and then there's a series of hormones, herbs, supplements, things that are all helpful. They all change your brain's biochemistry. Literally, they're changing your neurochemistry toward preventing and reversing the problem. And as you indicated, it starts with nutrition. Again, as a scientist, I was shocked to see how important nutrition, because I was never taught that in medical school or in my postdoctoral fellowship, that in fact nutrition is so critically important. So what we use is something that we call Keto Flex 12-3. What we mean by that is the following. There's the keto part, so we want to drive people into mild ketosis because guess what? Your brain actually works better with mild ketosis. And a lot of people heard about the studies with coconut oil from Mary Newport, and that is a part of the overall idea. But what you want to do is to drive yourself into mild ketosis. And you can actually get, and many people do, a very inexpensive ketone meter. For example, you can go on Amazon and get a ketone meter, and you want to get your ketone level to between 1.5 and 4.0 millimolar. So that's the general area you want to be. The way our brains work, you either need to feed them with glucose or you need to feed them with ketones. And they turn out to work better memory, less Alzheimer's on the ketone side. The second part of Keto Flex 12.3 is the flex part. What that means is it's flexible. You can, if you want to be a vegetarian, you can do that. If you don't want to be a vegetarian, that's okay too. Meat should be a condiment. You can have wild-caught fish. You want to stay away from fish that are in these tight farms because they have lots of toxins associated with them. You want to stay away from high mercury fish, and so you want to stay away from the ones that are long-lived and that have large mouths, like tuna, swordfish, and shark. You want to use the little guys, like smash fish. That's salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herrings. Those are the good ones. They don't have a lot of mercury in them, and they have very good omega-3 to omega-6 ratios. And then, so that's the flexitarian part. Then the 12.3 means 12 hours. That's the fasting period minimum between finishing your dinner and starting your breakfast or brunch or lunch the next day. That is because you need to have time for your brain, literally, to cleanse itself. It has autophagy, which is a process where it eats up and basically recycles things like mitochondria that aren't working very well, damaged proteins and things like that. And then literally, it changes its own architecture and flushes out things through what's called the, quote, glymphatic system. So you're literally cleansing your brain at night. If you have the, quote, Alzheimer's gene, which is called ApoE4, then you want to shoot for 14 to 16 hours of fasting. If you don't have that gene, and about quarters of us don't have it, then you want to shoot for about 12 to 14 hours of fasting. So 75 million Americans have a single copy of ApoE4. If you have 0 copies, then your chance of Alzheimer's during your life is about 9%, not too high, but not 0. If you have a single copy, it's about 30%. If you have 2 copies, that's 7 million Americans, then you have a more than 50% chance. Most likely you will get it. So absolutely you want to be on prevention. Then the 3 part of Keto Flex 12.3 is that you want to have at least 3 hours after you finish dinner and before you go to bed, because you want to let your insulin levels come back down before you go to bed. So otherwise, you're storing fat. When you have that sort of Keto Flex 12.3, and of course, it's important to point out, this is not, when I tell people this is we're going to put them on a ketogenic diet, they say, great, I love that bacon. No, this is a plant-based ketogenic diet. If you're going to have any beef, for example, you want it to be you want it to be grass-fed. If you're going to have chicken, you want it to be pastured. So you want these things to be not full of toxins. And you want to stay away from bacon, actually, because of the nitrates. So it's a plant-based or plant-rich ketogenic diet, lots of vegetables. You want to have, if you're going to have fruits, that's fine. Make sure that they are the lower glycemic fruits, like the berries, and you want to stay away from the tropical fruits, for example. Interestingly, fiber turns out to be remarkably beneficial. Most of us do not get nearly enough fiber. So, in fact, I take fiber every day. Lots of people do it. It's actually really helpful. Number 1, it actually brings your glucose down. Number 2, guess what? It brings your cholesterol down. Number 3, it actually binds toxins and helps you to eliminate the toxins that we're exposed to in our cosmetics, in our air we breathe, in the water, everything. And, it's interesting. We all are used to hearing about carcinogens. Don't eat that food because it's got carcinogens in it, like hot dogs, for example. Nobody ever tells you about dementogens. They're very, very important. And these things that we're exposed to, including sugar, by the way, are dementogens, and we want to stay away from those. So, the idea here is get a plant-based, high vegetable, low carbohydrate, KetoFlex 12-3. It's described in detail in the book. It's also, by the way, it's on the website. You can look at drbredesen.com. It's on the website. So lots of ways to get to this. But the bottom line is you want to drive yourself into a ketosis, give yourself the appropriate times for fasting, and give yourself the appropriate nutrients that are so important for optimizing your cognition. And as we talked about before, this is not just about preventing Alzheimer's. It's also about optimizing and enhancing normal cognition.
Wow. Wow, wow, and wow. Okay, so let me summarize a little bit and see if I got it all. I don't think I got it all, but the KetoFlex 12-3, the idea of fasting, your break fast is at least 12 hours after you've had your last meal, and the 3 hours is not to eat dinner, finish dinner past 3 hours before you go to bed or to sleep. And what we want is a mild ketogenic diet where your body is using ketones for nutrition rather than glucose. We're looking at plant-rich or plant-based, grass-fed beef, pastured chicken. We're looking at wild fish and the smash fish, which is salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. And then I missed about the 3/4 piece. There were more initials. There were more letters. And then you also talked about the EPO4, EPOE4.
Right.
So
APOE4, right.
APOE4.
Right.
And then
right.
You talked before that about something else. Was it CP something?
You mean the LDL particle numbers, or which ones are you talking about? I talked about the various fish. Omega-3s, of course, we all have omega-3 to omega-6 ratios that we want to be around, 1 or 2 in that range. We don't want the omega-6 to be up at, 8 or 10 times the omega-3s. And many of us, it's even, 15 and 20. We want it to be closer to 2 to 1 or 1 to 1.
Okay. Nice 1-to-1 ratio between our omega-3s and our omega-6. And how can people do that? Of course, the omega...
With those.
Yes, with the
right.
smash fish.
You want to minimize the inflammatory things. You want to use your smash fish. And, of course, some people like to take fish oil or krill oil or things like that. You want to be careful because those things themselves can get oxidized. The fish actually protect their omega-3s, so you do a little better with that source. Many of these things, as you know, are actually better to take if you can with food than to take as supplements. But the supplements, of course, as their name implies, are supplementary. And things like, probiotics, you often do better by taking fermented food. Prebiotics, you can either take prebiotics as a supplement or you can take things like jicama that actually function as prebiotics. Literally, they are the food for the bacteria. And so a lot of these things, if you can get them in food, great. But if you're not getting enough in food, then you want to supplement with the supplements. Exactly.
So I think most people don't know to take probiotics, and it's such a simple thing to do. And you can get, there are so many on the market, and in your book you talk about the best probiotics for people to take. And as you said, it is Dr. Bredesen
.com is one way to go. Yep.
drbredesen.com. This is so generous of you, Dr. Bredesen. Just like in the last show that you recommended the toxic solution,
right.
which is just amazing. And prebiotics is mostly in your vegetables, right? Having a lot of vegetables.
Yes, and things, there are specific ones that tend to be good, as I mentioned, jicama, things like that are actually essentially these long carbohydrates that often oligosaccharides that will essentially feed the bacteria that are in your microbiome. As you know, it's turned out that the microbiome, which of course wasn't discussed much and really wasn't mentioned at all